Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. This meeting will come to order. This is the regular meeting of the Land Use and Transportation Committee. I'm Supervisor Malia Cohen, chair of this committee, and to my right is the vice chair, Supervisor Scott Wehner. Joining us shortly will be Supervisor Jane Kim. Also want to recognize we have a guest with us today, Supervisor John Avalos. Our clerk today is Miss Elisa Samara. I also like to take a moment and thank Jesse Larson and Leo DeAssis, who will be working with us, televising and broadcasting this meeting on SF Gov TV. Madam Clerk, do we have any announcements today?
Yes, please make sure to silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Completed speaker cards and copies of any documents to be included as part of the file should be submitted to the clerk. Items acted upon today will appear on the December 1st Board of Supervisors agenda unless otherwise stated.
All right, thank you very much. Could you please call item number 1?
Item number 1 is an ordinance amending the planning code to establish a citywide transportation sustainability fee and applying the fee to hospital and medical services and clarifying affordable housing and homeless shelter exemptions from this fee.
All right, colleagues, this is the duplicated copy of the TSF, which was sent back to this committee from the full board so we could memorialize a new fee structure for the hospital and medical service uses. After weeks of conversation, I'm pleased to report to the full board meeting that we had reached an agreement on the nonprofit hospitals to contribute to our transportation, public transportation system. In the initial proposal, all hospitals were 100% exempt from paying TSF on new hospital and medical service facilities, but as a result of our negotiation, the duplicated ordinance was amended to include 2 points. The first one is an $18.74 fee on net new hospital beds, effective immediately and not after the seismic mandate. The second key point is a new $11 fee on medical services buildings over the 12,000 square foot mark. Now, both new hospital beds and new medical services have an impact on our transportation system, and it's essential and fair that everyone contribute something to the system which serves the patients as well as employees. So, colleagues, I have circulated a few more cleanup changes to the language that we previously introduced. These changes are a result of our ongoing review and discussions with the Hospital Council about the final proposal. They include a few key points that I'm going to read into the record. First, it's the cleaning up of the definitions to use the term outlined in Section 102 of the Planning Code for health services and hospitals. Second, it's adding a reference that grandfathered non-residential and PDR portions of projects are subject to the TSF, but will pay at the applicable TIDF rate. The third point is adding a reference to the calculation section on page 11, clarifying that the TSF is calculated only on the amount of net new gross square feet created by the development project, so that it will be consistent with all other references in the planning code. And the fourth point will be a simplification of fee calculation for new hospital beds, including adding a formula which matches the language describing the calculation in the methodology. The fifth point will be adding a new provision to clarify future changes of uses from a hospital to a non-hospital use that will pay the TSF based on square footage, not receive the benefit of the hospital examination. The sixth is the goal of this change was to clarify that the hospital exemption is intended to benefit hospital uses, not future property owners, who will be changing the use of something such as office and would have otherwise paid a high rate if they had built the project. And finally, the final addition is some other grammatical and non-substantive changes throughout the ordinance that have been included in at the request of the city attorneys. So these changes are non-substantive. They are cleanup in nature to the conceptual agreement that we reached a few weeks ago. I also like to thank many of the department staff who has assisted myself and my staff to coming to this agreement. This includes MTA, planning, DPH, and the City Attorney's Office, as well as the members of the Hospital Council for working with us on this particular compromise. I want to recognize Ed Riskin and Alicia Jean-Baptiste from MTA, John Ram, Corey Teague and Lisa Chen from the Planning Department, Colleen Challa from DPH, Andrea Ruiz Esquide, my apologies, from the City Attorney's Office, and David Serrano-Sewell and members of the Hospital Council that are also here with us today. I also want to acknowledge Andrea Bress on my staff, who has been instrumental. Many of you have connected with her as we negotiated this. So, colleagues, given the number of hearings and hours that we have spent on this item, City staff, they're here for questions, but they're not going to be making a formal presentation. And if there are no other questions, perhaps we can move to public comment. Guest number one, Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you. And I'm glad that we sent this item to committee with the duplicated file that has the amendments that we've made that grandfather in the non-residential commercial projects that were submitted before July 21st, 2015 to pull to pay the full TSF. The amount of money that I'm seeing from my legislative aid that this is going to enable us to access for transit is about $2.1 million. I'm not sure if that's actually the amount of money that will be paid in full, or I think it's the difference between what was these sites were going to pay from the old TIDF to the TSF. So it's a significant amount of money, and so I do appreciate my colleagues supporting this amendment. And it's a little part that we've done to actually grow the amount of money we have for transportation projects that this TSF will fund. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and take public comment. I've got one public comment card here from David Serrano-Sewell. Why don't you come up? And just as a point of reminder, public comment is 2 minutes. You'll hear a soft chime indicating that you'll have 30 seconds left. Thank you for being here, Mr. Serrano-Sewell.
Members of the committee, and thank you for that summary. I do want to take a moment and echo your comments, Supervisor, and acknowledge your leadership on this issue and bringing the interested parties together, your staff, Ms. Bruss, and others on the board. We think this is an equitable solution and one that, as a community, we can live with. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to work with you and your team. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Dee Dee Workman from the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber was really hoping that hospitals and medical centers nonprofits would fall under the charitable exemption, but we understand the reasons for the amendment. We want to commend all the parties involved, the Hospital Council, Supervisor Cohen and her staff, for working out what is really a reasonable and equitable decision on hospitals, and the Chamber is supportive and is supporting the TSF. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members that'd like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, public comment is closed at this time. So, colleagues, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I think we've struck the right balance, the right deal to ensure hospitals and medical service facilities are contributing to our transportation system, while also recognizing that they provide an important public benefit. What I'd like to do at this time is to make a motion that we adopt the amendments that I've circulated and forward this item to the full board with a positive recommendation.
So I will make a motion for those amendments and also a motion to move this forward with recommendation. And just before we vote, I do want to just thank Chair Cohen for all of your work on this. It's a very complicated ordinance with so many moving pieces and a lot of different interests and stakeholders and different perspectives coming to this compromise agreement on how to balance payment for impact on traffic, which I think our hospitals certainly contribute to, but finding a more fair way to actually assess that via beds versus square footage, I think is a nice balance. And I also want to appreciate the Hospital Council for working so closely with your office so that we could get to this place. So thank you for everyone's work.
Thank you. So a motion has been made and seconded, and without objection, This motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you for the support, colleagues. Thank you, Andrea Bress, and thank you, David Serrano-Sewell. Madam Clerk, could you please call the next item?
Would you like me to call items numbers 2 and 3 together?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Item numbers 2 and 3 are ordinances amending the general plan, planning code, and zoning map to amend the Rincon Hill area plan and redesignate bulk limits and exceptions to tower separation requirements at 525 Harrison Street.
All right. Thank you so much. Supervisor Kim is the lead on this, and I'm going to turn over to Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, Chair Cohen, and also happy to see these two items come before the Land Use Committee. First of all, I do want to thank the developer Hines for cooperating in working with our office over the last 3 months since August when it came to the Planning Commission towards working with us on a project that provides increased affordable housing on site, but also takes into account some of the design elements and massing concerns that were raised by the Planning Commission. The site is a very unique site located just north of the 80 Bay Bridge and is a very strangely shaped parcel and of course across the street from many residential towers that are in construction right now as part of the Rincon Hill Master Plan. The site is currently zoned at 400 feet and we are going to be making some amendments to the Rincon Hill plan to allow for a more slender tower that also is able to provide more square footage and builds additional units on the site. This project requires payment to the Rincon Hill Community Infrastructure Impact Fee and also the SOMA Community Stabilization Fund to support neighborhood infrastructure improvements and community stabilization, and these funds total at over $5 million. What is introduced at the full board is legislation that reduces the requirement on the tower separation controls to accommodate for a more slender tower, as I had mentioned earlier, rather than a squatter base, per the Planning Commission's recommendation. It also commits the project to a higher below market rate commitment from 12%, which is what is required now via law, up to 15%. And I really do want to appreciate the developers for providing this additional commitment with the additional 26 units that will now be built on site. The project sponsor is also committed to paying 50% of the Transportation Sustainability Fund fees, which we actually just passed out of committee today. And it also commits the project to complete significant pedestrian safety improvements surrounding the tower's base, including sidewalk widening, street trees, and a new signalized crosswalk on Harrison and on Essex. This was of tremendous importance to our residents in South Beach and Rincon Hill, but also our pedestrian safety Vision Zero advocates throughout District 6 as we build development in these high-density areas, but also near high-injury corridors. It's really important that we are able to mitigate for new residents that will be coming into this area, and I'm certainly pleased to see that Harrison and Essex will become more residential friendly through the passage of this project, despite being right at the mouth of one of our freeway exits. So these are some of the basic overall components of this project. I do see that Planning Department is here to present on the specificities of the parcel, and so I'm going to hand things over to our department unless there are any questions or comments from committee members.
Supervisor Weiner has a few comments.
Thank you very much. I'm just maybe planning will address this in terms of the TSF that's being paid, that it's half of the TSF instead of the full TSF, and also the rationale around the affordability percentage. Mm-hmm. And then I can comment afterwards.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Rich Sucre, Planning Department staff. The legislation for you is a request to initiate legislation associated with a general plan amendment, planning code text amendment, and zoning map amendment for the project at 525 Harrison Street. The proposed legislation includes a general plan amendment of the Rincon Hill area plan to address modification of the tower spacing and tower bulk requirements of the San Francisco Planning Code. The proposed planning code text amendment would allow for exceptions to the tower bulk, upper tower sculpting, and tower spacing requirements for Block 3764. Finally, the proposed zoning map amendment would decrease the height limit for the subject parcel from 65/400R to 65/200R. These legislative amendments would accommodate a project at 525 Harrison, which includes a new 23-story residential tower with approximately 205 dwelling units, 500 square feet of ground floor retail space, and 103 parking spaces. On September 24, 2015, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the General Plan Amendment, the Planning Code Text Amendment, and the Zoning Map Amendment. At the public hearing, the Planning Commission reviewed the proposal to increase the inclusionary on-site affordable housing requirement from 12 to 15%, as well as to accommodate for the payment of 50% of the TSF fees that the board just passed today. So this concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions. Just to address some of Supervisor Wiener's comments on the affordability was able to be accommodated due to the proposed legislation before you. So because they're getting an increase in development potential from the legislation, we're able to accommodate for an increased affordability. So.
Madam Chair, may I?
Yes, please.
Yes. So in terms of the rationale for 50% of TSF instead of 100% of TSF?
I might defer to the project sponsor on that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Steve Vettel, Ferrella, Brunner, Martell, on behalf of the project sponsor. The ordinance that you just passed, the TSF, has a 50% payment for projects in the pipeline. That's exactly what we committed to doing that, regardless of what the legislation ended up being. Mm-hmm. We're now fully in tune with the legislation.
So it's the grandfathering.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vettel. Supervisor Kim.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. So we negotiated this back in September before we knew what the final amendments for the TSF would be. But I did ask the project sponsor to commit to 50%, which is ultimately what was selected for the grandfathering in projects via the full board. But this was committed to before that amendment was put in. And I do want to appreciate that commitment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, see, is there any public comment at this time? Please come on up.
Supervisors, good afternoon. I'm Cameron Faulkner with Hines. We did bring just a few slides of the project presentation. We can quickly just run through those if you would like. I just wanted to introduce myself, let you know that we've been working on this project in collaboration with the
Let me ask you, sir, how many slides?
Oh, there's 5. We can
okay,
skip
we can
them
take
if you'd
5
like
slides.
to.
Sure, let's begin. Are they queued up?
Yep. Sure.
Okay.
So this is just a very brief summary of the slides that we presented at the Planning Commission. This is very hard to read, but it gives you the summary of the project. I think Supervisor Kim alluded to this. It's a 205-unit project, 22 stories of occupied space. It was originally 25 on-site affordable units. That's been increased now to 31. The project is at the corners of Harrison and Essex. We've got the bulk showing here and the massing that was ultimately a collaboration with the commissioners of the Planning Commission and planning staff and our team. Solomon Cordwell Benz is the architect. And you can see that the sculpting was done to really meet the vision of Rincon Hill with the strong base and then tower above. And so that's the one side of the project. Here's an architectural rendering from the other side showing how we've pulled the tower back from the freeway, from the exit ramps, creating that sort of space and the lessening of the facades along those lines. This is a rendering of the project as it's now conceived. It's been sort of lightened up to match the Rincon Hill plan. Oh, I'm out of time.
Sorry about that. Just continue.
It's okay. Lastly, just wanted to show sort of the before and after of the streetscape. The upper left corner shows the current building on site. It was an old racquetball club. It's currently a nightclub and a auto detailing shop, so uses that aren't really in line with the Rincon Hill plan. And so our new project will bring good, solid, ground level active uses, a cafe, a bike shop, streetscape improvements, pedestrian safety improvements, which we really are very pleased with. I do have a couple of emails from Vision Zero and the folks that were supporting us here and helping us come up with the plan for the pedestrian safety improvements. So I'll just leave those with you here, but wanted to just give you that quick overlay and answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation. Let's see, let's go ahead and open up for public comment at this time. If there's any members of the public that are here. Sir, are you done? Sir?
Yes.
Are you done? Okay. Just hanging out there at the podium. If there's any members of the public that'd like to comment on items 2 or 3, please do so at this time. Come up to the podium. Public comment is open. Okay, seeing no public comment is closed. All right, Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. I have just passed out a series of minor amendments to make to these 2 items today. The general plan amendments makes no substantive changes. There are just some clerical corrections as well as updated and corrected title and findings. The planning code amendment adds the requirement to provide 15% on-site affordable housing in order to use the tower bulk and spacing exceptions. This is on page 7, lines 1 through 6, and adds a finding that the tower bulk and spacing exceptions allow the site to get a 20% or larger increase in development potential so that the city may require more than the on-site affordable housing permitted under Prop C. And this is on page 2, subsection D, lines 15 through 21.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. It's pretty easy. Supervisor Rayner, is there any remarks? All right. Supervisor Kim, is there a motion or anything that you'd like us to do?
Yes, I'm making a motion to amend.
All right. A motion to amend is made by Supervisor Kim, seconded by Supervisor Cohen, and with that objection, that motion passes.
And I'd like to make a motion to move forward both items to the full board with positive recommendation.
Absolutely. And with that objection, that motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any other items before this body?
That concludes our business for today.
All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This meeting is adjourned.